Maybe you've noticed that every time we talk about a new system, we highlight its importance by saying how you'd die without it. Like, without your muscular and skeletal systems, you'd collapse into an inert bag of goo. Or how if we magically removed your respiratory or circulatory system, you'd die in a couple of minutes because your cells wouldn't have oxygen. That's because most of our body's systems are just trying to keep us alive, minute to minute. But one of those systems doesn't really care if you live or die, at least not until it's done its job. It's how every living thing gets its start, but it doesn't really kick in until puberty, and even then it's more concerned about investing in the future than keeping you alive. When it comes to your reproductive system, it's not concerned about you so much as it is about your alleles, your genetic code, and the future of the human species, which are no small stakes. This system includes our primary internal sex organs, the gonads like testes and ovaries, the various sex hormones they secrete and the gametes, the sperm and eggs they produce. It also includes the glands, ducts, external genitalia, and particular brain parts that help the gonads and gametes do what they need to do, which basically is mate, combine alleles, and make babies. Now, all animals have their own particular and fascinating anatomical methods for getting their gametes together, and we could do a whole course just on that and never run out of material. While we may seem tame compared to animals that turn bright red, bite off penises, or starve themselves for a chance to breed, our systems are still plenty complex. In fact, it's going to take most of the month to get through all our various anatomical parts and hormones and explain how sexy time, fertilization, pregnancy, and development work, starting today with the female anatomy. And remember, this is nothing to be shy about. When we're talking about sex, we're talking about the future of humanity. So, when we talk about sex, we're talking about spreading our alleles around. But when we visualize sex, most of what we picture are our anatomies. Who has what and what goes where. In an anatomical female, that involves the vulva, which includes the mons pubis over the pubic bone, and labia majora and labia minora, the elongated skin folds that surround the vestibule, which contains both the urethral and vaginal openings. Beyond that is the vagina, which is how menstrual blood and babies leave the body, and how sperm gets in. But as much as we tend to put all the focus on the bathing suit parts, those are only the genitalia, the external sexual organs. Reproductively speaking, they're the least important parts of the system. The ground control of the female reproductive anatomy, the place where the orders are given, are the ovaries. Their main job is to produce and release female gametes and sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone. Gametes are haploid cells, meaning that they only have one set of chromosomes and are formed by meiosis. When a sperm fuses with an egg, they make a diploid cell, which has all the genetic instructions required to make a baby. Each ovary lives inside a fibrous sac that consists of a layer of connective tissue called the tunica albuginea and another layer of cuboidal epithelial cells called the germinal epithelium, which is actually part of the peritoneum that lines the abdominal cavity. The ovary itself contains a cortex that houses developing eggs and a medulla that contains most of the ovary's blood vessels and nerves. The business of passing on alleles and saving humanity really begins in the basic reproductive units in the cortex, the ovarian follicles. These are tiny sac-like structures that each hold a single primary oocyte, a sort of incomplete proto-egg, along with supporting follicle cells around it. Females are born with essentially all of these early versions of eggs in all of the primordial follicles they will ever have, around 1 million at birth. But right around then, the oocytes stop developing. They get stuck in the first stage of meiosis, and they stay that way for years, sometimes forever. The actual process of egg creation, or oogenesis, is delayed until puberty, when the body is physically ready to reproduce. Unlike animals such as salmon or mayflies, whose eggs all mature at once, human eggs mature one by one almost constantly, released so that every month or so, a mature egg is either fertilized or dies to make way for a new one. This is the basis of the menstrual cycle. But menstruation is only one part of one cycle. The menstrual cycle is what happens in the uterus to prepare for a fertilized egg. The other cycle, the ovarian cycle, is all about the maturation of the follicle and egg, and it actually drives the menstrual cycle. Every day, even before birth, a bunch of follicles begin a process of maturation that takes 375 days. Out of that bunch, usually only one follicle will end up supporting a single mature egg. The rest don't get the hormonal boost they need and undergo atresia, a kind of programmed self-destruction. Starting around puberty, the hypothalamus and pituitary set up two concurrent cycles: the ovarian cycle in the ovaries, which ripens eggs and secretes sex hormones, and the menstrual or uterine cycle, which prepares the uterus to capture and nourish any mature, fertilized eggs. When puberty begins, the hypothalamus starts up the ovarian cycle by secreting gonadotropin-releasing hormone about once a month. This stimulates the anterior pituitary to release two more hormones: follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH, and luteinizing hormone, LH. FSH stimulates the growth of a follicle, triggering it to secrete estrogen, which helps it mature even more. That surge of estrogen stimulates the pituitary to release LH, which gets the dormant oocyte to complete meiosis I and move to metaphase II. This process takes about 14 days, at the end of which the follicle pushes up against the ovary wall, ruptures, and ejects a mature oocyte. This is ovulation. The damaged follicle then becomes the corpus luteum, which releases progesterone, some estrogen, and inhibin to prepare the uterus and stop more eggs from developing right away. The egg then enters the fallopian tube, which is not directly connected to the ovary, so it has to travel a short distance through the peritoneal cavity to get there. If it meets sperm, it completes meiosis II and becomes a true ovum. Whether fertilized or not, the egg travels down into the uterus, a muscular organ with three layers: the outer parametrium, the muscular myometrium that contracts during labor, and the inner endometrium, which provides a blood-rich lining for an embryo. If the egg is fertilized, the embryo implants in the endometrium. If not, the outer functional layer of the endometrium sloughs off, which is menstruation. The menstrual cycle, averaging 28 days, has three phases. First, the menstrual phase, lasting about 5 days, when hormone levels drop and the endometrium sheds. Second, the proliferative or pre-ovulatory phase, when rising estrogen helps rebuild the endometrium. And third, the secretory or post-ovulatory phase, when the corpus luteum releases hormones to thicken the endometrium even more, unless fertilization doesn't occur, in which case the cycle starts over. If fertilization does occur, progesterone keeps the endometrium intact and nourished until the embryo implants. If not, hormone levels fall and the shedding process begins again. Either way, the cycles continue, keeping the reproductive system prepared for potential pregnancy each month. So today, you learned about female reproductive anatomy, how sex hormones affect oogenesis and ovulation, and how the ovarian and menstrual cycles prepare the body for reproduction. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to keep learning with us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next video, where we'll dive deeper into what happens after fertilization. Thanks for watching.